So thank you for opening your home. It should always be full of Torah and Smachot. We're getting ready for Shavuot. So instead of doing some halachot on Shavuot, I thought that we'd just discuss a couple of customs and understand why we do what we do. So Shavuot night, when you think of most holidays, there's something specific that we do. Right? What do we do on Rosh Hashanah? The commandment is to blow the shofar. On Pesach, you have to eat matzah, you have to drink the 4 cups, you have Seder night. When you think of Shavuot, what do we do?
Eat cheesecake.
Yeah, eat cheesecake. That's about it. Right? So we'll get back to that in a second. But what do many of the men at least do on Shavuot night? I remember last year I found it interesting because there was a bunch of girls and I said, if you want, we'll do a shiur. And some said yes, some said no. And it never entered my mind. But a bunch of girls were like, we're not walking home by ourselves at 2 a.m. Like guys, just, it doesn't enter, like, who's going to walk us? Which I totally appreciate. Ended up, we did it and we had like over 50 girls. But Tikkun Leil Shavuot. Tikkun means that we're fixing something. The question is, what are we fixing? What did we do wrong? So what would you tell me? What did we do wrong? That we have to stay up all night on Shavuot?
We missed. We slept being ready.
We slept through.
Exactly.
We slept through. So you'll often hear me quote Rabbi Shimon Schwab. He says, I don't understand. If I tell you, at some point this week, I'm coming to your house with a check for 1 million pounds, you're going to go to sleep? No way. You're already counting the shoes, the bags, the wig, whatever it is that you... Different people think in different, like, some people think in cars, some people think in shaitels, some people think in shoes, right? Jewelry. Different people think in different...
We're not for a man.
The man's not thinking about shaitels or jewelry.
No, I think
The man thinks in cars. Maybe, yeah. But different people thinking, all right, I could pay off this much debt, right? Different people. If you know that someone's coming with a check for 1 million this week, you're not going to sleep. The Jewish people knew exactly when Hashem was coming. He says, be ready in 3 days. I'm coming to give you the Torah. And the purpose of me making all the miracles and splitting the sea and the plagues and everything was to give you the Torah. How could it be they were sleeping? They should have been waiting by the door like this. Says Rabbi Shimon Schwab, once you hear the answer, it's so pashut, it's so simple. You're like, how come I never heard this? How come I never thought about that? He says so beautiful. He says, the people know God's going to come and speak to them. When God speaks to any prophet, how does he speak to them?
They fall in their sleep.
In their sleep. We go out of our way. One of the...
collapse in the middle and just get...
Well, it seems that they're in their sleep. One of the Shloshes Ikarim, 13 fundamental beliefs, is Moshe Rabbeinu is Av HaNevi'im. He's the father. He's like a whole nother level. And what made him this whole other level is because Panim Panim. God testifies in the Torah, Parashat Ba'alotecha, I speak to Moshe face to face. Avraham Avinu, David HaMelech, every other prophet, Eliyahu HaNavi. How did they speak to God? In a dream. So says Rabbi Schwab, the people are told God's going to come speak to you and give you the Torah. What did they say? Must be. How's he going to speak to us? In our sleep. It was probably hard for them. They probably had melatonin and some tea, spa day to relax them, to be able to sleep because they were probably so excited. God's going to come speak to you. We're all going to be prophets. So what did they do wrong? Why is it Tikkun Leil Shavuot? What did they do wrong? Surely, don't overthink things. God says, I'm coming, be ready. Don't start. Yeah. Like people ask me, well, what's your view on aliens? I said, when they come, I'll worry about it. Like, I'm not going to waste headspace and time. It makes for some good movies, right? What happens with the dinosaurs? I said, at one point, God decided they need to be here, and now he decided they don't. It makes for some good Jurassic Park, yeah, but I don't waste time thinking about things that are irrelevant. It's totally irrelevant. Why? That's the way I look at it. Feel free to disagree. Don't start, people tell me, for Mashiach to come, there has to be the war of Gog and Magog, and this has to happen, that's that. I said, I'm a simple guy. I do what God tells me to do. Let Hashem sort it out. Maybe World War II is Gog and Magog, maybe the war now is Gog and Magog. I don't know. It's not my problem.
Is that like you would say, like when people take upon themselves like too many humrah to do something? Like is that like would that fall on?
Not necessarily, because it depends why they're accepting. Someone's not well, right? We said the shiur should be the full Shleimot, Ben Shalva, right? We don't know why. No, sometimes God gives us wake up calls to do stuff, and because He wants us to accept things upon ourselves, 1,000,000%. I mean, they were saying about this funeral yesterday from my wife's cousin's boy. Like my brother Rabbi Farchi spoke. He said, if Hashem wanted to take him, why didn't just take him right away? Why make us all suffer for 4 months? It's crazy. It's meant to be. It's meant to be kapara. We have no understanding why God does what He does. But why have him be in a coma for 4 months? And he said, do you know what happened over the past 4 months? How many people went out of their way, the Tehillim, the learning, the Shalom. People accepted upon themselves things. People that haven't spoken to siblings and family members in months or years made Shalom. This kid did in a coma what people would dream, the biggest rabbi would dream of doing, and inspiring and getting so many people. You tell a rabbi, you say, hey, if you can get 1,000 people to say Tehillim, wow, that'd be amazing, very successful. How many Tehillim were said because of this job? He did so many amazing things. So we don't understand why Hashem does the things He does and the way He does it. But no, definitely there's times where Hashem wants us to accept, and it's a wake-up call. But don't start saying, well, if this has to happen, you need to do normal things. God says, be ready, be ready. God didn't tell you go to sleep. You know what I mean? And we know that it ended up being that they weren't supposed to. Because it's Tikkun, Leil Shavuot. But they were coming from a good place, that's very logical. And I think the answer is don't start taking out the Gemara thumb and saying, well, if, and maybe I should do this, because the Gemara says that if from before Mashiach, we need... Be normal. Do the regular... Don't overthink things. I don't know. I would imagine they didn't ask Moshe Rabbeinu. Right? Otherwise Moshe would have said, no, don't go to sleep. That's not what God asked. You know what I mean? But they all decided this must be. Don't ask Hashem. I mean, which will lead us to what we're going to talk about, Be'ezat Hashem. Another quick thing on Shavuot. You mentioned cheesecake. So the minhag is to eat milky. I remember when I was in Israel, there's only one day Shavuot. So over here in London, you get 4 different meals. One of them could be milky. If anything, it's a break. You're happy. And this year it's a 3-day Yom Tov. 6 meaty meals. You're like, oh, right? It's just very heavy. It's already like taking a deep breath. Pesach, I was on a program, and B'li'an Hara, it was like ridiculous. And I never thought the words would come out of my mouth. On the 8th day, there was dino ribs and steaks and carving stations. And I said to my wife, I can't eat any more meat. Just like, I truly feel the loss of the Bet HaMikdash during the 9 days when we can't have meat. Like that's, the other stuff doesn't bother me. That, like meat, and like I just couldn't. Right? So why is it that we have milk on Shavuot? Where did that custom come from? There's about 6 or 7 different answers. What would you say?
We didn't get the halacha of shechita yet, so that's why we...
So one answer is, we just got the Torah. We were just commanded that there's this thing called milk and meat. And therefore all the pots and pans are not used properly. They might have had milk and meat in them, and they weren't able to do anything on the day. The day was Shabbat, so they can't start slaughtering new meat. Everything they had might have been problematic. So one answer is that's why to get meat, you can't slaughter new fresh meat on Shabbat, and they just got the laws of everything, and therefore to milk the cow is allowed. And then the question is, you want to get into, can you use the milk that's milked on Shabbat? Yes, no. Is it just, not a class for now, but that's one answer. Another answer is the gematria, the numerical value of the word chalav is chet is 8, lamed 40. Chet lamed bet. Chet's 8, bet's 2, and lamed. She teaches in a school. She got to know this stuff, right? This is maths. This is okay.
It's a bad thing.
Okay, 40. So why chalav? Why 40? Because obviously Moshe Rabbeinu goes up to receive the Torah 40 days and 40 nights. Another interesting answer I saw was that we know that Moshe Rabbeinu was born when? Zayin Adar. But our rabbis tell us he was born 3 months early. Right? You never see in the Gemara, there's always either a 7-month baby or a 9-month baby. Why is there never an 8-month baby? If I'm not mistaken, in the 8th month is when the lungs develop. So a baby can't. I was talking to a guy because I told him I'm going on this Hanukkah rally and they deal with fertility and all different things besides just fertility. Someone came to me after the speech and he said, Rabbi, last year my wife had a miscarriage. Nobody knew about it after 6 weeks. Nobody knew. But could we do something to in memory of the neshama that was or wasn't in the bit? And he said, my wife a year and a half later still hasn't gotten over it. I said, have her speak to Chana. I said, no, but we have kids. I said, that's not the only thing they do. They have therapists. This is part, So one guy, I told him I'm going on the car, but he says, a couple of years ago, beautiful family. He said, we had a stillborn after 8 months. Because 8 months, it's very 7 months is better than 8 months. 8 months is when the lungs develop.
But why? I would think
they're in the middle of
in the middle of the breathing. Either you do before, but in the middle is when the lungs are. Nowadays it happens to be, if they see on the scan there's a problem and they're worried that it might go early, Hashem put us in an amazing generation. They can give a shot to the baby while it's in the womb to help the lungs develop, that even if it is born in the 8th month, chas v'shalom, that it won't be a miscarriage or stillborn. We live in a special time that Hashem gave us. But
I want to hear what you spoke about in the Bible. So
okay. It was mostly jokes, but but yeah, I could give you the Divrei Torah part a different time. So Moshe Rabbeinu was meant to be born 3 months later. He was born 3 months early. So if he was born on Zayin Adar, you count 3 months, Nisan, Iyar, Sivan. He was meant to be born on Vav Sivan, right? My Hebrew birthday is on Shavuot. My English birthday was this past Shabbat, and my Hebrew birthday is Shavuot, right? This year I'm 40, I'm getting old. Baruch Hashem, thank you very much. But Shavuot, I have 3 names. My parents only had 2 kids, so they had to use all the names they liked. So my name is Moshe Nachum, and then the third one is Chagai, because I was born on a Chag. I was born on Shavuot. Okay. So Moshe Rabbeinu was meant to be born on Shavuot. And not a coincidence, he's the one that brings down the Torah and gets the Torah from Hashem. But more than that, when we think about Moshe Rabbeinu, we know as a baby, the irony, if you will, no such thing as irony, but the irony is they didn't have formula, they didn't have Similac or whatever it is, Materna. In America now, there's a crisis, right? In America they also don't have, but blame Biden. But either way, there was a big factory that got shut down because of the FDA. That should have been done quicker. But in those days, what happened if somebody can't nurse the baby? They'd get a wet nurse. So when we think about Moshe Rabbeinu, he ended up, who was his wet nurse?
Well, it was his mother.
It was his own mother, right? Moshe had to grow up in the palace for whatever reason. Right. But at the same time, the nursing and the milk that Moshe Rabbeinu drank was kosher milk. So the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu was supposed to be born on Vav Sivan, was supposed to be born on Shavuot, and it ends up being that the milk that he drinks is not by coincidence his own mother's milk. She got paid to nurse her own baby and let him know that he was Jewish, etc. All that irony, if you call it coincidence, which obviously no such thing, that all to some extent was meant to be and connected back to Shavuot. So that's another reason why we have milk on Shavuot. There's a few other reasons, but maybe a different time.
I was thinking about my kids were watching the Prince of Egypt recently, and I was just like she puts him in this basket, and I was thinking how I don't think I would have been able to do
for
that.
sure.
Come back and nurse your child again, and then have to say goodbye.
For sure, you can't imagine. That being said, most babies are being thrown into the ocean and drowning. Yeah. There's, I don't know if you've ever been to Poland. So I've been to Poland 20 times, and there's a letter, dear Mirala. This woman sewed it in to her child's sweater, jacket, whatever it is, and it talked about how she had to give up her child, and it's it's heart wrenching. I mean, she said, "I don't want you to think we didn't love you. I don't want you to think your father risked his life to be able to get you medicine." It's like it's very powerful. No, they give her the last, not kinder transport to here, but transport out to one of the churches or whatever it was, and the parents didn't survive. But you read the letter, and I don't know if it says who the parents are. The letter is Dear Mirala. You know what I mean? But it's heart wrenching.
Why?
You know what I mean? But that's the same thing.
On Shavuot,
it had to be. The Midrash tells us that they would take down who was pregnant. They would see who was pregnant, and they would come back 9 months later and say, "Okay, great." Or however many months later, they realized how pregnant they were, and they'd come back, take the babies, throw them in the ocean. So when she realized this was happening, to save him, but that way also they had some time with him the first 3 months before it was realized that she was due to give birth. Yeah, that's how they were catching a lot of the babies. Everybody was obviously hiding their babies. So yes, that connects back to Shavuot and Moshe Rabbeinu and the nursing. So there's chalav, the gematria. There's the fact that the pots and dishes weren't necessarily kosher. They weren't able to slaughter fresh meat, so they were able to have milk. Also, just in general, we forget that there's refrigeration. Anything that they did back in the day had to be like fresh. Everything, milk in a way was harder. You have to go take it, turn it into butter, into cheese. That was also considered quite important and prestigious and connects back to Shavuot. So I thought we would discuss, to get us ready for Shavuot, something that I think is very fundamental. Our rabbis tell us there's a midrash. Right? It's based on, I think, the beginning of the pasuk of Zot HaBeracha in the book of Devarim. Hashem goes v'sarach miseir lamo hofia mahar paran v'atam rivot kodesh mimino eshtalamo. Hashem goes to all the different places. He goes to the different nationalities, different nations, and says, "Would you like the Torah?" So he goes to, I don't remember which one was first, Ammon or Moab. He says, "Moab, would you like the Torah?" What do they ask? Very logical question. You don't know what it is that you're talking about. Here's a 613-page contract. Please sign. Let me speak to my lawyer. Right? I'm going to go and have her look through it. Like, what do they say? What's in the Torah? God says to Moav, Lot tenaf, don't commit adultery. You need to be moral and ethical. And they say, Moav, we come from Lot and his daughter. Like that's how we came to be. This thing is not for us. Okay. He goes to Esav, Edom, and he said, would you like the Torah? And they say, very logically, what's in the Torah? And God says, don't kill. And they say, that's like our thing. We have a blessing from our father Yitzchak. Live by the sword. That's our thing. No, thank you. We don't want the Torah. He goes to Yishmael and says, would you like the Torah? And they ask, well, what's inside the Torah? And Hashem says, don't steal. And they say, oh, no, thank you. We don't want the Torah. God comes to the Jews, says, would you like the Torah? And what do we say? We're Jewish. We say, how much is it? Right? He says it's free. And we said, we'll take 2. And that's how we got 2 tablets. No, I'm just kidding. I think a Rabbi took it off. I forget which Rebbe he quoted. He said there was one Rebbe. He said if the Jews would have said, what's in the Torah? And Hashem would have said, no double parking on Golders Green Road. No, thank you. No, thanks. Right? We can't have this Torah. Right? What did the Jewish people say? Na'aseh v'nishma. No problem. We're going to take it and we're going to listen and understand. So Rabbi Shimon Schwab asks a question. He says, we say every morning in the Birkot HaTorah, Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim. What does that mean? Asher bachar banu, God chose us. We're going to say in a few days on Shavuot, Ata bechartanu mikol ha'amim. You chose us from all the nations. Ahavta otanu, you loved us. Ratzita banu, you wanted us. Romamtanu mikol leshona, you exalted us above all the languages. Romamtanu kideshanu mitzodecha, you gave us the mitzvot, right? What do you mean? Ata bechartanu mikol ha'amim. Based on this midrash, are we the chosen people? No. We're the by default people. We're the only frayerim, if you will, that said okay. Everybody else said no, thank you. Furthermore, asked Rabbi Schwab, what did Hashem say in the Torah? Don't kill, don't commit adultery, don't steal. Those are 3 of the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach. They're part of the Noach laws. They have to keep them anyways. Yeah. So what do they? Why does God offer? They say no. And then I heard Rabbi Zweig from Miami ask a phenomenal question. He says, if they would have said no to Shabbat, totally appreciate that. If they would have said no to kosher, I can totally get that. Is there a functioning society in the world where you're allowed to go around killing, committing adultery, or stealing? My father grew up in Yemen, right, until the age of 11. He told me one of his earliest childhood memories, somebody stole. They brought him to the city center. They made sure everybody came because they wanted to make an example. What did they do to the guy? Chop off his hand. Nobody had to lock their shops. What's worth stealing? You'll lose your hand. You're crazy. There's no society in the world you're allowed to steal or commit adultery. Right? Called the Scarlet Letter. Used to walk around, adulterers, burn them. Or murder. What were they saying no to? We don't want the Torah, Hashem. No, thank you. How could that be? So Rabbi Schwab gives a very interesting big chidush. Says Hashem was never going to give them our Torah. He said there was going to be 2 Torahs. A Torah for the Jews of 613 commandments. We were always the chosen people for that Torah. And then he specifically picked mitzvot b'nei Noach. He picked some of the Noach laws that they have to keep anyways and said there's going to be a separate Torah for the non-Jews. The Jews are going to have a Torah with 613 commandments. And the non-Jews will have a Torah with 7 commandments. What's the difference? If I have an opportunity to steal and I don't, I get a mitzvah. If a goy has an opportunity to steal and he doesn't get a mitzvah, he doesn't get an avera. He doesn't have a Torah commanding him not to. He has God, but he doesn't have a Torah. Says Rabbi Schwab, so what's the big deal that we said Na'aseh v'nishma? It was always meant for us. It was always going to be ours. He says a big chidush, he says, when we said Na'aseh v'nishma, in our DNA became part of us that we connect to God and want to do the right thing. And he brings a few proofs. On Seder night, we have the Who Knows One. Right? For us, Nirtza is one of the highlights of Seder night. We do the Chag Adya, and I haven't seen it in 10 years. I remember, it must have been about 10 years ago, I was in Miami, and we did the Seder night. We're family friends with the Shwekis. So Yaakov Shweki was there, it was beautiful. And I bought masks. You know, you could buy like glasses or masks with the 10 makot. Yeah. They had the Chag Adya. They're discontinued. So I gave each kid a mask. And each kid had to do a sound of whatever animal they did, right? So there's the goat, and there's the cat, and there's the dog, and there's the stick, right? And there's the water, and then there's the malach hamavet, right? And then there's God,
right? Literally what I feel like you met My husband had exactly the same
Okay,
sounds.
so we do the sounds.
Two
2 years ago by COVID, like everybody was just like, it was panic, and everybody was home all day. So I said to my kids, make masks. So they said that, I'll show you my phone later. They made all the different masks, and they wore it. And the stick one, like my daughter got twigs and put them all sticks, and it was very cute. So that's one of the highlights. But there's also who knows one. Right? Echad miodea. One is Hashem. Two is the luchot. Although, what's 10? 10 commandments. And 2 is, what's the difference? But okay, right? In Arabic, we also do it in Arabic. My father was from Syria, so there's Minyane Umandra Amahu Wahid. Wahid is one, right? Today, which is 2, is Musa and Aharon, Moshe and Aharon, not the Luchot. 3, right? It's Arba Matna, 4 mothers. Tlatna Abatna, there's 3 fathers, right? We have the whole thing.
Same. Right, I never thought about that.
Yeah, well, you got up to 11. What's 11?
The
Stars in Yosef's dream, representing
the
the Shvatim. And then what's 12?
The
The
12
Shvatim. So what's 11?
No, the stars.
That's so funny.
Also the same thing. Not our class for now. Different time. We can go through it. But says Rabbi Schwab, 1 is Hashem, 2 is the Luchot, 3 is the fathers, 4 is the mothers, 5 is the books of the Mishnah, of the Torah, 6 are the books of Mishnah, 7. It doesn't say Uncle Maishi, it's 7 of the days of the week. That's not what it says. It says Shiva Yemesh Shabta, 7 days of Shabbat, 8 days of Milah, 9 are Yerchel Yedah, months of the labor, or 10 is the commandments. 11 is the stars in Yosef's dream, 12 are the tribes, 13 is the attributes, midaya. Right? It says all of those are Jewish, except for, no, because it's not days of the week, it's Yemesh Shabta. That's why I said to you, it's of Shabbat. The only one that's not Jewish, that the Goyim also have, is the 9 months. So why would we pick 9? We didn't have anything else for 9? Says Rabbi Schwab, no, because what does a Jewish child have? In the womb, learning with a Jewish child is an angel learning the whole Torah. I heard one rabbi say, he says, sometimes the baby is born late. Right? The last Masechet in Shas is Nida. It's quite a complicated one. So if a baby is born late, it's still, it wants to make sure it's got it all good. The angel, making sure he's got it clear. In the womb, there's already, you have, before you're born, the whole Torah is inside of you. When did that happen? Said Rabbi Schwab, when we said Na'aseh v'nishma. He brings another proof. He says that the Gemara says, if somebody doesn't want to divorce their wife, doesn't want to give a get. I don't know if you saw in the news a couple of weeks ago here in London. I know someone didn't give a get to their wife. I don't know the person, I know the family. Over 20 years, gave a get a little while ago. Why? Because in Manchester, there was a case here in London, revolutionaries, it made the news, that the guy is going to jail for 18 months because he won't give his wife a get. So in law, you could Google it. In law, in London now, if the guy won't give his wife a divorce document, he can go to jail.
A Jewish divorce.
A Jewish divorce.
Is he actually going to jail?
Yeah, he's being stubborn or whatever it is. That's the article that I read. Yeah, but it was a big deal. Yeah, says the Gemara. What do you do if a man doesn't want to give a get? I'm not recommending this, but what is the halacha back in the day? Kofinoto. You don't kill him, but kofinoto. Ad shomer otsani. You beat him up till he says, "I want to do it." Asked the Rambam a very obvious question. Doesn't want to do it. You're literally breaking his arm. You got the mafia and you're breaking his legs. So it doesn't mean that he wants to do it. How is that I want to? Kofinoto. You beat him up. Ad shomer otsani. He says, "Okay, I want to do it." No, he doesn't. And says the Rambam, every Jew wants to do the right thing. But the ego gets in the way, so you're beating up the ego. But when did it happen that we want to do the right thing, says Rabbi Schwab? When we said Na'aseh v'nishma, part of the Jewish DNA became that we want to do the right thing.
But can I ask you, just like on a more fundamental kind of basic level, like, why would they agree to it if they didn't know what was in it?
Oh, we'll get back to that in a second. Great question. So that's Rabbi Schwab. Rabbi Schwab says, what does it mean, Asher Bacharbanu? We were always going to get our own Torah. What was God offering them specifically, Shem and B'nai Noach? He picked those because that was going to be their Torah. So says Rabbi Zweig, what did they say no to? Don't kill, steal, commit adultery? What were they telling Hashem? They were saying, Hashem, we'll decide what's considered killing. We'll decide what's considered adultery. We'll decide what's considered stealing. Right? Abortion, we decided that's okay. I don't mean to be a bit rude, but just so that we can appreciate. If I went to central London and stopped 100 random people and said there's a happily married couple that's happy to have an open marriage, is that considered adultery? What percentage of people would say if they're both mutually consenting and they're happy to have an open marriage, that's not adultery? What percentage would probably say it's okay?
100%.
Not about 100%, most.
80%.
80%. Yeah, well, if they're okay with that, why not? Chas v'shalom. That's our generation deciding. We decided God was considered adultery. We decided what's considered stealing. Right? Nowadays, you have somebody, right? She's a lawyer. You have somebody, they have a company, they borrow or they take 100,000 pounds worth of goods, and then the company defaults, they shut down the company. Quite often, what happens? They open another company doing the same thing with a new name. Let's say the second company smashes it. They're doing amazing. They have millions. The guy comes back and says, I don't know if you remember, you borrowed 100 grand worth of goods. Legally, they're not liable. Why? Different name. That's not considered stealing. It's a different corporation. This one said Levy, this one says Shmivi. You know what I mean? In Jewish law, you borrowed 100 grand. If you don't have it, you don't have it. But now if you're doing something else and you have it, you borrowed the money from the guy. You got to pay it back. You can't. We'll decide what's stealing. We'll decide in our corporations what's legal, what's not legal. We'll decide what's... That's what the Goyim are telling God. It's not that they think it's okay to kill, steal, commit adultery. They're saying to Hashem, we'll decide what's right and what's wrong. We'll decide what's considered stealing.
Morality. Like we'll decide morality.
Yeah, we'll decide morality. And if you look at the world 20 years ago, and for sure 50 years ago, it's a different place. I'm not looking to be controversial, but I saw Ben Shapiro, he was saying, and again, just we appreciate where society is. You want to say right, wrong, I'm not getting into it. He said, I think it was like 30 years ago, don't quote me because I don't remember exactly the numbers, like less than 2% of society considered themselves homosexual. And 15 years ago, it was like 5%. And now it's like between millennial age, 20%. So society is shifting based on what they're seeing in the news and social media. Because we're deciding what's ethical and what's moral. We're deciding what's right and what's wrong. We'll decide if it's okay. And when it becomes the norm, then what's the big deal? Everybody, must have been about 20 years ago already. There was a TV show on it, I think it was 8 o'clock at night. And I think they said the S swear word. So a bunch of parents wrote, there's ratings, right? There's NC-17, there's PG-13, there's that. So they wrote to the TV, this is in America, commission board, whatever it's called, saying my kid's watching this show and they're learning swear words. And they got written back to, and it said, in today's society, that's considered the norm. What was... In the 60s, there was an episode of the Brady Bunch that they had to edit big time. Why? Because when the guy filmed, he filmed going past the bathroom. There was nobody in the toilet. It's just, that's not something we put on TV. Elvis, when he would shake his hips, they only did it from the waist up because they felt that wasn't modest. It's a man, Elvis. But what's considered normal is constantly shifting because we, in the world we live in today in Western society, we decided we know what's right and what's wrong. We'll decide what's allowed. What did we do? We said, Hashem, whatever you decide for us. Why would the Jewish people say yes to a 613-page contract when they have no idea what it says in it? If I came to you with a 613-page contract and said, please sign here, I'm assuming you wouldn't do it, even if you sort of trust me. If your parents came to you and said, hey, we have some paperwork, can you just sign this? You going to ask questions? No, why not? You trust. They want what's best for you. It's your parents. Why did the Jewish people say, Na'aseh v'nishma ta Hashem? Our Father who just saved us from Egypt, split the sea, 10 plagues. We don't have questions. Na'aseh v'nishma. We're going to do whatever you say, Hashem. No, it's also nishma. Na'aseh. We're going to do it unconditionally because you said so, God.
You say that, but then even when they came to the sea, and then they didn't have emunah. And then they said to Moshe,
it's a great question. That needs its own discussion. It's its own class. What happened at different intervals, what, where, why, when.
Yeah.
Agreed. But on a whole, they understood that God's there. They saw the miracles. And that they know, and they had to be in the right place. And that's part of the growth that they've had over the past 7 weeks. I think we mentioned last week. There's the growth process of the weeks of the Shavuot. Now they're at the stage Na'aseh v'nishma. Now it's important not just Na'aseh, also Nishma. What do I mean? I heard from Rabbi Farchi, I think he quoted Rabbi Noah Weinberg, the founder of Eish HaTorah. He said, most people in life, they're robots. They're wearing Prada and Gucci and Louis Vuitton and Ferragamo and Chanel, right? You can tell my wife has expensive taste. Baruch Hashem. Right? And what's the ultimate vacation, ultimate holiday? You're sitting there on the beach with your pina colada in the coconut with the little umbrella, right? You have to have the little umbrella. Why are they doing that? Because that's what they saw in the movies. That's what they saw in the advert. They're robots. He said, you also have people wearing white shirts and black trousers, learning in yeshiva, also robots. It's just a matter of who's pushing the buttons. He said, I'm not saying don't enjoy your pina colada and Chanel. And I'm definitely not saying, don't be in yeshiva. All I'm saying is, Don't be a robot. Naaseh. We do because God said so. But nishma, it's also imperative that we understand why we do what we're doing. Naaseh v'nishma. What happened on Shavuot? It became part of our DNA. We said, Hashem, we're going to subjugate our minds and our souls to you, Hashem. Whatever you tell us, we know as our Father, you want what's best for us. And whatever you tell us is right and wrong. Right? A few years ago, must be about 7 or 8 years ago now, it was February half term. I was running a trip to Israel. A guy said to me a couple months ago, says, Rabbi, you made me religious. I said, I don't remember you coming to any of my classes. Yeah. He says, no, you don't remember? You asked me, are you going to yeshiva? And the guy said to me, he said, yeshiva's not for me. I said, yeshiva's not for you. He was in Hasmonean. I said, yeshiva's not for you, or Hasmonean base all day, every day is not for you. He said, same thing. I said, not really. Many yeshivas aren't like that. So I said, look, I'm running a yeshiva trip in a few weeks. Come check it out. Make an educated decision. And if it's not for you, great. But if it is for you, great. At least see it. Realize that's not what it is. And he came on the trip, and he spent 3 years in yeshiva. Went to America another 3 years. Now he's, very, very religious, right? I remember taking him on the trip. I don't remember the conversation. But I offered that. Make it educated. Some people are like, I'm going for 3 years. I'm like, chill out. Come see what it is and decide. So I'm on February half term. I get on the plane. You know what they say about an American? Sit down on the plane next to him within a half hour. You know his whole life story. So I sit down next to the guy. How you doing? What's your name? Paul. What's your name? Moshe. I said, what do you do, Paul? He says, I'm the chairman of the Reform, Masorti and Liberal Rabbinical Institution. What do you do, Moshe? I said, Orthodox rabbi. And we started laughing about how Hashem put us next to each other. And we start schmoozing. Seems like a nice guy.
That joke.
Right?
Alias.
So we were schmoozing. And I said, look, I'm not looking to take the mic. Can I ask you some questions? Because I've asked other people, and they don't have the answers. But you're the chairman. Like, are there more female rabbis or male rabbis? And he said, in the 90s, when the feminist movement was very strong, it was probably 3-1. So now it's about 60-40 female to male. I said, do they speak out against intermarriage? He says, we don't speak out against it, but what you see in the movies, that there'll be a priest and a rabbi officiating at the same time together, that we don't allow. That's just for the movies. We don't have both a priest and a rabbi, that we don't let. It's either one or the other, but you can't have it. Okay. And we start schmoozing, and he says to me, Moshe, I think that Judaism is about being a good person and doing the right thing. I said, I agree 100%. He gets a big smile. He says to me, my mother-in-law is 86 years old. She loves going to synagogue. Highlight of her week. She's an old lady. It's far away. The only way she can get there is to drive. Isn't it right? Judaism is about doing the right thing. Isn't it right that my mother-in-law should be able to drive to synagogue on Shabbat? Good question.
Yeah.
What would you answer?
Just like, don't want to be there. Don't answer that question.
What situation? You were really
Right? What would you say? So I said, I felt like we were playing chess, and he was like, check. Yeah. Right? He had the biggest smile. I never went for any rabbi training. I don't know the right answers. I know what makes sense to me. Could be they're the right answers, could be it's my own answers, and there's a lot better answers, but I'll tell you what makes sense to me. I said, Paul, what happens when somebody comes to me and says, I'm broke. I got nothing. Some days I literally go hungry. My best friend works in Burger King, and he brings me the leftovers. Isn't it right that I shouldn't have to go hungry? It happens to me. It's not kosher. And what happens when my next door neighbor says, you don't know, my brother was in a terrible car accident. Terrible car accident. They didn't think he was going to make it. And this nurse, she literally nursed him back to life day in, day out. The odds were astronomical. She nursed him back to life. And then they fell in love. It was like a movie. Happens to be she's Muslim, or happens to be she's Christian. Isn't it right that my brother should be able to marry the person that saved his life and that he fell in love with? I said, Paul, if each person starts deciding what's right and what's wrong, you'll have a million different Judaisms, and ultimately, you'll have no Judaism.
Such a good answer.
Checkmate, right? And he was like, recent excavations have shown that revelation at Sinai wasn't... I'm like, don't change the subject, right? But we have to understand it doesn't matter what I think is right, what you think is right. It's what Hashem thinks is right. Hashem wrote the Torah. He wrote it eternally. It's for all times. Don't just say it's something that was applicable many generations ago. Right? This week's parasha is called Bamidbar, right? In the desert. I was only with a guy before I came over here. He said, how come it was given in the desert? Why in the desert? Why is the name of the parasha always before Shavuot, Bamidbar, and it was given in the desert? And I said a couple of answers. One answer is that the first Mishnah in Pirkei Avot says Moshe kibel Torah Sinai. Moshe got the Torah from Sinai. Moshe didn't get the Torah from Sinai. Moshe got the Torah from Hashem. So what do you mean Moshe kibel Torah Sinai? Right? It wasn't just Moshe; it was all the people. Right? There's a bunch of questions we could ask. But so our rabbis tell us he got it because he was like Sinai. What was special about Har Sinai? Your kids will come home from school, they'll have a whole sing song, right? Mountain, I don't remember the rest. But, right? He's not the biggest, he's not the whitest, he's not the greatest, he's not the most beautiful. Maybe it was a she, I don't know, or mountains considered male or female, I don't know. But, right? Hashem says, because you're the most humble, I choose you. Why does Hashem choose Moshe Rabbeinu? Because he's 100% empty. What does that mean? If I take this cup and I fill it up to the top, how much did I fill it up? About 80%. Because it was already 20% full, or 10% full, whatever that is. If there's only a few drops left and I fill it up to the top, I filled it up 98%, 99%, but I didn't fill it up 100% because there was something in there. Hashem says, I choose Moshe Rabbeinu because he's the emptiest vessel. He's the most humble, and therefore I can fill him up, if you will, 100% so that he can now go give over to the people 100%. Har Sinai was the most humble. Moshe kibel Torah Sinai. He was connected to Har Sinai because he was like Har Sinai. Heish Moshe Anav Mikol Adam, most humble man who ever lived. Why like a desert? Why in a desert? Because when you think of a desert, what's in the desert? Nothing. Right? You need to be that empty vessel to be able to receive the Torah 100%. Don't come in with your own, I think X. I think Y. I decided. Well, you need to explain to me. One of my first weeks in London, it was a shiva. I went to the shiva, and this woman comes to me and she says, Rabbi, I swear to you, if you can explain to me why there was a Holocaust, I swear to you, I'll start keeping Shabbat. I'll be religious. Right? And she knows there's no answer. There's no logical answer, no right answer. Even if there was a logical answer, it's an emotional question. But I decided that until I understand this, I'm not doing. That's not what we said when we got the Torah. Naaseh, we're going to do. Hashem, whatever you tell us to do, we're going to do. Doesn't matter what I think. Because if everything's dependent on what I think, look at the generation. This one thinks this is okay to do. This one says it's okay to have the Burger King because they're hungry. And this one says it's okay to marry this person because they help save life. And this one thinks that it's okay. Somebody gave me a gift, free suit. I got, so what if it has some wool and linen? A free suit. I'm not going to go spend money there. Each person will start deciding what's right and what's wrong. I want to go to this simcha. I want to go to this thing, but I can't walk into the simcha on Shabbat wearing heels, right? Wearing flats. I got to wear heels. But the only way to get them, it's in St. John's Wood. And right now there's an Eruv. I remember a bunch of years ago, I was in St. John's Wood, walked for a bar mitzvah. I was here only a few months. And I said, oh, hi, what's your name? Where are you from? Okay. And this lady's holding like a bag with heels. And she's like, oh, I also walked from Hendon. In a million years, she would never get in a car. Meanwhile, in St. John's Wood at the time, there's no Eruv. Is there really that much of a difference between getting in a car or carrying?
I don't know. I see it from the other way.
I agree. I would never get in the car.
She's probably bad at getting in a cab. No.
There's like a hierarchy that Daniel doesn't understand. I remember when we were engaged and we were invited to a family bar mitzvah in Bushy. So my parents didn't go, but my aunt and uncle did, and we took a hotel and we all had a room, and he remembers this day. He couldn't understand. He went to tell his brothers. He's from a religious family his whole life. He was like, it was raining on Friday night, and my uncle had the map and the umbrella, and he's underneath the umbrella and the map where there's no Eruv, and he's like, definitely.
He would never use his phone. He would never get in the car. So I get that, and it's good. There's certain things that you have. This is not allowed. I appreciate that 1,000,000%, but I'm just saying, technically, halachically, there's no difference. There's no difference. I appreciate that, and that's good. It's good that there's certain things that we don't do.
The same thing. He was like, I just don't understand.
No. So I'm not saying I don't understand. I'm not saying I don't understand. I totally understand. I'm just saying technically, but this person decided I would never get in the car. I would never, you know what I mean? But this I would never do. Why? Because in a way, either it comes from lack of knowledge, which is most of the time, or I decided this is allowed, but this isn't allowed. It's not for you to decide or for me to decide. It's whatever Hashem decides. That's what happens when we say Naaseh v'nishma. The other nations tell God, we don't want. What do you mean? You think it's okay to kill, steal, commit adultery? God forbid. I'll decide what's considered killing, stealing, or committing adultery. Right? Bamidbar, we go to a desert and it's empty. But the other answer I gave him, I'll end with this, was, why Bamidbar? There's a lot of people, they say, when I have X, then I can be religious. I know people tell me, when I'm in London, it's too hard. When I'm in Israel, Israel, it's much easier for me to be religious. I keep this when I have that. Right? If I had the right type of synagogue, of course I'd be religious. But this is the situation. I gave a shiur one time, and these people were here from Israel, and they were staying in the house, totally not religious. And I gave a whole shiur, and they came over, and they meant it as a compliment. They said, Kvod Harav, Rabbi, if you were a rabbi in Israel, you'd probably be religious. And they meant it like, wow, we really enjoyed it. That was a nice thing. I felt like stabbed. Like, I gave a shiur. Like, why? If it was like this, and if it wasn't like that, in Israel, it's much more black and white also, which is almost either with us or against us, which is a big chaval, but not our discussion for now. What is it? Na'aseh v'nishma. We say, Hashem, whatever you tell us. You're our dad, and dad, we sign contracts without asking questions. We know that you know what's best for us, so we don't ask. As we get ready for Shavuot, in the desert, there's nothing there. If I had this type of house, if I had this type of shul, I know people would say, Rabbi, if I lived in Miami, of course I'd keep kosher. The restaurants over there, whoa. But in London, I can't keep kosher. The restaurant, I eat out. If I lived in Miami, of course I'd keep kosher. I'd only go to kosher restaurant, right? If I had this, the desert's empty. There's no if. There's no, the reason the Jews accepted the Torah is Hazaku Baruch, look how beautiful it is. Yeah, we were in Israel and we had the waterfalls and we had the food and the mountains. Who wouldn't accept the Torah in that situation? But nowadays here, no. You're in a desert. There was nothing. There was no fanfare. They accepted the Torah because Hashem asked them. It's not about what they got. It's not about the ambiance. There's nothing there. It's big, empty and desolate. We need to be like a desert to receive Hashem, and we have to say, it doesn't matter what my surroundings are. Still, I accept Hashem. Whatever you tell me is right and wrong. That's what we're getting ready for on Shavuot. So, Be'ezat Hashem, we can make sure to connect and to understand and to appreciate. And we say, Hashem, Na'aseh v'nishma, whatever you tell us. Doesn't matter what I think is right and what you think is right. It matters what God thinks is right. Because otherwise, we'll end up with nothing. There'll be no Judaism left within 20, 30, 50 years. Every person will start deciding, I think this is okay. No, that's not okay. You can't marry that one. Well, kosher is not such a big deal. I think kosher is a big deal. But Brit Milah is, that's the baby. It doesn't matter what I think. It matters what Hashem thinks. There'll definitely be people who say, Brit Milah is wrong. Why would you do a little baby? Let him choose when he gets older. What are you talking about? Right? Na'aseh v'nishma, Hashem, you know what's best for us, and we accept that 1,000,000%.